are these people?
You don't know that face too well. Whistleblower himself. Went to prison for it. So he's dealt with police officers quite a bit. Which you're familiar with the DC police force. This is the Secret Service police force on top of that in the background. But John Kirkakou wants to talk to you about tactical language. What's that, you may ask? Well, we'll get to that. But he writes about aggressive cops in Consortium, which, shout out Consortium. They're doing pretty incredible work right now. If you're not reading their articles, you should be. We tend to. But police are allowed to swear at you. It's called tactical language, and it's meant to establish immediate dominance. So this is the psychologist in public service, particularly the Division 18, which Kirkakou is going to get to their study in a second, but they talked about tactical language. Many have established that the use of profanity in a professional capacity can lead to unfavorable or outright negative evaluations of performance. Despite the importance of the quality of verbal interactions with members of the public, few studies have considered the impact of police use of profanity in these exchanges. Though many police officers may use profanity, sometimes referred to as tactical language, as an additional use of force tool, it may lead to increased risk to the officer by way of subject retaliation or backlash from the public due to a perception that the officer is out of control. Because they definitely haven't been called that frequently, Collin.
Right.
So, but yeah.
What's your profanity?
So, Kirkakou begins. Something on the way to work infuriated me recently to the point that I had to write about it. I'm interested to know if I'm being too sensitive or if others have had the same experience and are as angry as I am. Warning, I use strong language in this article. Some readers may find it objectionable. Kirkakou rides a Vespa to work every day from Arlington to my office at 17th and K Street in Northwest Washington, D.C. The total trip is about 3.5 miles. Because of traffic light synchronization, I always get the light red at the intersection of 17th and E Streets Northwest. This is immediately next to the old executive office building, which is attached to the White House and houses the offices of the Vice President and the executive office of the President. As you can imagine, there's always a significant police presence. You can confirm that, Collin, I'm betting?
Sure. I don't go in the White House area often, but sure.
Yep. So that police presence is usually not a problem, but on Tuesday of last week, traffic was jammed up at 7 a.m. in a way that just wasn't normal. Because I'm on a Vespa, I always legally wind my way through the cars to get to the front of the line to make my left turn onto 17th Street. I did that on Tuesday and got a front row seat to the eventual departure of Vice President Kamala Harris from the White House grounds. It wasn't a big deal. You see the VP and cabinet members around town all the time. I see President Joe Biden's motorcade at least once a week. All it does is screw up traffic. Anyway, uniformed Secret Service officers have stopped traffic going in all three directions at the intersection, waiting for Harris to pull out. The light cycled 3 times.
Wow.
To my right, a driver who was waiting to continue north on 17th Street decided that he couldn't wait any longer and began to make a U-turn to instead go south on 17th Street and presumably get around the jam up. An uninformed Secret Service officer on a bicycle screamed, "You! Turn the fuck around! Get the fuck back in line!" The driver briefly protested that he had to get to work and there was nothing wrong with the U-turn when traffic coming in the opposite direction was blocked. The response from the cop was, "Shut the fuck up before I pull you out the fucking car." The driver dutifully got back in line.
Wow.
So that's where we start.
I mean, that escalated quickly.
That was immediately escalated.
Right.
from the jump. So, but I couldn't help myself, says Kirkakou. I parked my Vespa on the side of the road and walked the 50 feet or so to the cop. I said, "What's your problem? Do you talk to your parents like that?" "I doubt it." "Fuck off," was his response. I got back on my Vespa and went to work, furious. So,
if I did that,
right? Yes.
see, I can't do that.
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
that's his privilege saving him, because if I tried that, I would have been whooped right there. I'm sure.
You would have gotten
And
dragged off
arrested
that
right
Vespa, you know.
Right.
So the incident reminded Kirkakou very much of something that happened to me half a block away, just behind the White House 2 years ago. Somebody had stolen the back license plate from my car. I reported it to the police, who gave me a form to carry with me in the car until I could get new plates, in case you get stopped, which you will. The cop was right. I was stopped by police in 4 different jurisdictions 6 times over the next few weeks. Every time, the cop said that his Stinger system had detected a stolen plate and they needed to make sure that I was the owner of the car. No problem. I did have a problem the 7th time I was stopped, however. A young, aggressive, arrogant, uniformed Secret Service officer walked up to my window and asked, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I was a little short-tempered because the Secret Service had just pulled me over in the same spot the day before for the same reason. So I answered, "Well, if you don't know why you pulled me over, then how am I supposed to know why you pulled me over?"
Oh, wow. Oh,
He said,
wow.
"Get out of the fucking car." Again, I couldn't help myself. I said, "You better show some respect, kid. I never let my ex-wives talk to me like that, and I'm sure as hell not going to let some punk like you." He immediately called for backup and then stood there silently until his sergeant arrived on a bicycle. I said that I wanted to make a complaint. Nobody deserves to be spoken to with such disrespect. Who did this kid think he was to talk to me or anybody else like that? He's a cop. I didn't swear at him. I said, but I certainly could start. And to put a final point on things, I said it's no wonder that so many Americans hate and fear the police. To his credit, the sergeant apologized to me. He said the officer was young and inexperienced, yada yada, but I wasn't having it. I said that I appreciate the apology, but I couldn't imagine that this cop was a rogue. I looked at the younger cop and asked, "Have you been trained to swear at people?" To my surprise, he said, "Yes. We're trained to be aggressive. That includes swearing." I said, "Shame on you."
No.
I took my driver's license and stolen plate form back, and I went on my way. Collin is on the same wavelength I am. You were saying?
No, you're not trained to be aggressive. If anything, you're trained to protect and serve. That's
definitely not what they're trained to be. Like that's the thing is like
in practice. That's what they say, but not in practice. They do, but like
yes,
you can be direct, but not be aggressive. But definitely not to the point where you're swearing at people.
See, we're gonna get to it. So Kirkakou finishes in this segment. Many of you who know me know that I'm addicted to the 1970s television series Adam 12. I love it. I DVR it every day. I've seen every single episode at least 50 times, no exaggeration. There's one episode where the protagonist, Pete Malloy, is called in the lieutenant's office for a dressing down because he was rude to a citizen while writing a ticket the day before the lieutenant reminded him, "Our slogan is to serve and to protect." And he added that you have to be a bigger man. When did that change? So,
right.
Here's the thing. I've been around some of this police training. It's so they talk about this thing. It's called verbal judo. Okay. And they speak verbally like you would a fight. Right. So things like verbiage and stuff like that are strikes, right? Like it's literally planned out like it's a fight. Okay.
So literally, it's their it's verbal abuse.
Right. You have like takedown. Well, there's like takedown strikes, control, all that stuff, but it's verbal forms of that. Right.
Right.
So not necessarily abuse, quote unquote, although strikes are and can be. But we're going to get to some of the use cases. But I wanted to pull up. This is straight from Police Mag, like Police Magazine. Did you know they have a magazine, Collin? The cops?
No, but it wouldn't surprise me.
So this guy, correctional facilities guy, he's going to explain some communication skills for police officers. Okay. So look, Law Enforcement Magazine. See, police combat strategies and tactics, communication skills. That's how they view this.
Hello, I'm Lieutenant Kevin Dillon with my friends from PoliceMagazine.com. Today's strategy and tactic tip is going to be on enhancing our communication skills. Guys, communication skills has a tremendous amount of value. Now let's talk about the value. Because if our officers don't see the value in it, which a lot of times we don't, so, if we don't see a value in something we're being taught, the retention will not occur. Because we won't have that neurological activity and we won't have that retention. So let me share with you the value of what effective communications will do for you. First of all, have you ever had a violent altercation and next thing you know you have civilians jumping in that fight to help you secure somebody? I've had that several times. I guarantee you've had it several times. My colleagues have had it several times. Another thing is when it comes to presenting our case to court, civil litigation, we always have people making assessments from the jury box of what they believe. Now, again, don't believe what the media represent to us. They still look at it as the shining array of a warrior of what you are. All right? Now.
Blit. Terrible thinking, but yes, continue.
We diminish that, unfortunately. We can diminish that with a 4-second contact. It's what I call hero to zero. Remember, most of the public already views you as the hero you are. But can you imagine you being an individual of the public?
I mean,
I beg to differ.
What part of the public we talking about? Like the percentage is probably a lot lower than you think there, guys.
Maybe the people who are less melanated, but
Yep.
Public, and you pull up to an officer asking for Main Street directions, and you get this. Excuse me, officer, where's Main Street? Main Street, just keep going straight. You gotta drive away after 4 seconds and make an assessment like, what a jerk. Now you pull up to another officer. Oh, Main Street? Oh, just keep going straight right up the road. You can run right into it, and you'll have no problem. All right? I'll be here all day if you get lost. That person drive away is going to have a completely different thought process and recall than the first person did. Those negative impacts, you've all experienced it. We've gone to restaurants and sometimes that person is just a fantastic waiter. This person is very professional compared to the opposite. Unfortunately, what do we retain longer? The negative aspects of it. So one, we've had people jump in willing to risk their own personal safety on your behalf. Two, they're in jury boxes making decisions on your credibility. Don't diminish it within a 4-second contact. All right? Now,
after that,
say
you're
right
fine.
Here in a cell block. You have to arrest somebody here. Let's talk about the value of treating a prisoner with respect and dignity. All right?
Not shit.
This. Put your hands here. Hurry up, roll your fingers. None of that stuff. All right? Here, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, my friend. Listen, I have to fingerprint you. I have to process you. But the better you are and the more gentleman you are, I'll get you out of here possibly as fast as I can. I'll give you another anecdote. A buddy of mine that used to work here, the same thing. We had a big local guy, always getting into scraps. All right? Now he's being arrested, and this officer, listen, you be a gentleman. I'll fingerprint you. I'll get you out of here as soon as I can. Let me get your soda. Food and water calms the nerves. For some people, cigarettes or whatever. But you're treating the person with dignity and respect. So he arrested him, booked him, the individual was on his way. But he fulfilled his promise. Now, he probably realized that he was almost home, and then he pulls up, but he still fulfilled his promise. Say, go ahead, I'll jump in, I'll give you a ride. The guy goes, no, I'm all set, I'm right here, but thank you. It wasn't about a month and a half to 2 months later. The same officer goes to a fight in progress, runs behind the house, and it turned out to be like a big keg party, 200 people there, a lot of people all intoxicated. Now the officer gets there, his backup is still on his way. Next thing you know, they're starting to surround this officer. What do you do now? Out of the crowd comes this suspect. Bam! Pushes everybody out, stands right in front of the cop. Says, anybody wants to fight with him, they got to get through me first. You might want to get more people here. True story, all right? Another example of how treating people with respect and courtesy are willing to protect you. Now, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Blink, which is a phenomenal book, by the way. Within the book, he talks about a study done pertaining to doctors that are sued, all right? Now, they have determined that the doctors that spent 2.5 to 3 minutes more per patient were substantially less likely to be sued. And it had really little to do with the performance of what they were doing. It's on how they were treated. And of course, and then my law enforcement team will say, yeah, but you know, KD, we understand, but they don't arrest people. And I'm like, well, you know what? You didn't arrest those people in that jury box, did you? And those are the ones that might be just pulled right up to you and asked for directions. I had another individual in a meeting I was in not too long ago. Now he comes up to me, he's a businessman. He goes, oh, hi, Kevin, how are you? Nice to see you again. Hey, how things? He goes, I had to call the police the other day. I said, really? Share it with me. He goes, well, I caught 2 people breaking into my garage. I chased after them, and I called the police while I'm in my vehicle. Now, they fled into the woods, so I stopped because I'm not chasing in the woods. As soon as the officer pulled up, he said, the officer goes, what are you going to do now that you catch him? He goes, why don't you let us do our job? So now here it is, a civilian, our citizens, calling for help. Guys, he responded emotionally, not intellectually or intelligently, right? So he was under a lot of, the typical forebrain shutting down, the emotional brain taking over.
I talked about that before, Collin. You know what that's called?
Yeah.
The amygdala hijack, right? No more prefrontal cortex thinking. Your lizard brain has taken over. It's now flight, or fright. Flight, fright, freeze. That's it. There's 3 of them.
Chasing the suspects. But the only thing he could recall, and the only thing he wanted to talk about how was disrespectful he was treated by an officer they called. Now that's how long-term memory these people will remember those interactions. Guys, let's get rid of this treatment. Treat people with dignity and respect of which they deserve. I've proven to you, and I can prove it to you countless times, that they are willing to jump in. They want to adhere to you, and they will judge and make decisions based on what they believe from you. Don't be a hero to a zero. Enhance your communication skills. Treat people with the dignity and respect they like. Like I said, in closing, Napoleon said, an iron fist is always better served up in a velvet glove. I'm Kevin Dillon. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
So, any thoughts?
I mean, that just seems to be the opposite.
Yes.
Of
yeah.
Like
policemen with years of experience, like, are going to tell you, hey, be nice to people. You know?
Right.
Right. So, but it's that last segment, what do you say in close? That an iron fist is served better in a velvet glove, right? This is police mentality is part of the problem, in my opinion. You know, like if it stems from that, we're gonna fuck up somewhere. But even here, they are pushing back on this tactical language thing, right? So I found some more police people talking about it. This is Lieutenant Dan. It's Lieutenant Dan. So he wrote a thing on whether swearing is useful to police officers, right? And this is the only thing he thought that was actually warranted, right? So he writes, most police policies declare deadly force should only be used as a last resort If an offer gets to a point where a suspect is armed, non-compliant, and the officer is barely, as they say, to the left of bang, that officer might reasonably believe one attempt at verbalization may include a deliberate, life-saving, tactical cuss. That where this tactical language thing starts coming in, right? An officer on the verge of shooting may reasonably decide to try to save a suspect's life with one last desperate command: drop the gun now or I will fucking shoot you. These words said with the right combination of sincerity and urgency might just prevent an officer-involved shooting. You could call this a last resort tactical cuss. So that's one of the only ways they think it might be useful.
Right.
Now,
in a last resort.
Yes. So this stuff is coming from, and I forget this. It came up during Minneapolis, right? But it's see if I can find it. Police training. I'm looking, but there's a couple of these groups of police training groups that are like more military based, right? And it's treating suspects as perpetrators and that kind of stuff, and making them more afraid for their life than they probably actually are threatened, that kind of thing. But that's where this tactical language stuff is coming from, right? Where it's like you have to be aggressive, you have to be it's strength is your control method, right?
Right.
So and if you appear weak, that's a problem. So it's definitely that, like, that throws it's supposed to like throw you off your game by being sworn at abruptly so that you listen more. It's like it's a call to authority that they don't necessarily have. That makes sense. So Kirkakou continues. First, are cops allowed to swear at you? You bet they are. It's called tactical language, and it's meant to establish dominance in a situation. You are legally allowed to swear at a cop too, but it's a short walk from exercising your constitutional rights to a disturbing the peace charge. The group Psychologists in Public Service, which I pulled above, recently published a study that examined the issue of tactical language. The study sought to extend the findings of previous research by evaluating the extent to which police use of profanity influence not only ratings of police performance, but also the likelihood that participants would find force to be excessive. The researchers recruited 320 undergraduate psychology students and 320 adults in the community and asked them to view a video of a mock traffic stop and to answer questions about the appropriateness of the police officer's use of force during the video. The arrest video was filmed by troopers and staff at the Pennsylvania State Police Academy, and in it, troopers either used profanity or did not while attempting to subdue the subject. It was predicated that when the troopers used profanity, they would not only be viewed more negatively, but that participants would view the level of force used as excessive after controlling for race, gender, and previous negative experiences with police. So this is like blind study, right? Or while trying to be. Results indicated that participants who rated force as excessive had significantly less trust in police performance and in police use of force. That is, they doubted whether police agencies would fairly investigate citizens' use of force complaints, felt police did not always choose the appropriate amount of force during an arrest, and did not believe police treated members of the public with respect or effectively reduced crime in their neighborhoods. These people just sound like smart people. So when troopers used profanity, not only were their interactions with subjects rated as significantly more negative, they were also considered to contain significantly more excessive force than the arrest scenarios in which profanity was not used. When asked about what led to their decision to rate force as excessive, participants mentioned things like the officer cursing and yelling, language that was completely inappropriate, having a problem with the profanity, and police using curse words when they shouldn't have. When the troopers used profanity, they were described as lacking self-control, loud and obnoxious, verbally abusive, and frustrated too easily. That all seems pretty clear cut to me, as Tony Soprano once said to Richie April, those who want respect, give respect. And until the police change their collective attitude, I'm going to stand up to them. Says John Kirkakou. Care Bear, thoughts?
I mean, as I said, he can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't.
Yep.
So, like if I tried doing what he did, I would be arrested.
Right. Yeah.
So I think I understand what Kirkakou was saying, but as a white person, him, I have to take that with a grain of salt, because like, I think I've mentioned this on the stream before, but several years ago when I was in Boston, I was heading home, taking the subway home. It was late at night. Apparently there was a robbery nearby, and there was a cop that came in on the platform that I was standing on. So he was standing about 5 feet away from me, and he started questioning me like, "Well, was I like 10 or 15 minutes ago?" And I was waiting for the train, and I told him as such. And this guy was tall. He was probably about 6'3".
Yeah.
And and I asked him, what was happening, and he said, there had been a robbery, but I quote unquote fit the description.
Right. Average size black male. Like,
right. So so and he was getting ready, and like, again, I was just like, I'm Care Bear. Like, I'm not like,
right. Like if it was like slightly chubby, jolly, older than 35, like you'd be like, all right. I mean, kinda, but
right. But like, so he was, I don't know what he was going to do, but he looked like he was getting ready to do some things to me.
Well, and it's like the whole conversation is here, right? Like it's all this, or like holding on to the vest, or
right,
conversational dissonance.
But like I felt
5 foot away,
right? But like I was literally getting scared, and if it wasn't for a drunk woman who was on the other platform, who had seen me the whole time and heard the exchange going on between us and was yelling to the cop, he's been right here this whole time.
Yeah.
He, like, I don't know what he would have done. Like,
well, see, that's the thing, that 5 foot rule where we're ready to deal with any threat. It leads to the minute you step out of that bubble, like either you step out or he steps in, it becomes like he's losing control, right? What happens when you lose control, either perceived or actual? What does your brain do?
Right. But the thing is, in this case, he was very controlled.
Yes.
I didn't cuss or anything. I was doing like, hey, I was here. I asked him a question, what's going on, like, but he just kind of figured, oh, this guy fits the bill, so whatever. And he looked like he was ready to put hands on me, basically, but just given his height and like very control. So like, I felt like if I did what John Kirkakou did, game over. But also in this case, still game over, because I would have, I don't think he didn't believe. Again, it took a drunk woman to have him kind of back off.
Right.
If I, God forbid, like it was alone on that platform, like what would have happened to me?
Yep.
So I just think it's just a mentality of, yes, this aspect of control, but then depending on the cop could just take it to the extreme of being like, I could fucking do whatever I want.
Well, global solidarity in the chat. Police act with their own discretion. A judge determines legality later. And then on top of that,
exactly,
you get qualified
Right.
immunity, right? Which, like, because
Right.
you're a cop, you
So
get treated differently than if you were
right.
someone else.
So
You know, like mall cops are
so
under
I
more
just feel
scrutiny.
like
So
in this day and age, cops are viewed negatively, and and in a lot of ways rightly.
yeah,
Given recently, we saw the protests outside the DNC offices.
mm-hmm.
I'm sure a lot of you who are here have seen that, and I can relate to that because I was at the George Floyd protest 3 years ago, and people were protesting. And were there some, issues? Sure, yes, there's going to be, but it wasn't like an onslaught
Well, like
of
in the way
people
of
like
George
causing
Floyd,
trouble.
it's this guy with a police issued gas mask and blacked out gear starting the problems. Like, not to get too tinfoil hatty, but you know, so versus like a
So
group of
I
white folk on January 6th can walk right in. They give them a tour. So,
right.
you
So
know,
I just think for many cops there is that bias
yeah.
plus the power trip
Mm-hmm.
um, of the perception of someone like me who would be naturally be considered a threat, in society anyway, but maybe a threat to them,
Yeah.
given there may be some issues regarding people of color or whatever. Like, and you know, so yeah, like I said, I mean, I'll give it up to John for what he did. I can't do that,
Yeah. And
and so
definitely
there's
be
definitely
careful standing up to police if you're going to, you know?
right,
So,
right,
like, viewer discretion is advised.
right,
But no, I get it. I just wanted to showcase that little bit of like police mentality, where that is a thing with them. Um, so and that whole verbal judo stuff that they're taught on top of that, and it's like I was saying, that whole there's rules and tactics for how they deal with you, and if you know them, it's useful. Like, you notice once
mhm,
they enter that 5 foot gap, they're thinking about controlling you in some way, like that sort of stuff. Where it's like, then if you change the distance, or if they change the distance, it can affect. It's like if that guy took a step forward during that instance from where he was, you might have fucking just ran on instinct, you know
right.
like that's how this, and
Which
then
in
you
his
would be
mind will be
suspect.
like, "Oh, he's guilty of something, so I'm
Right.
gonna go after him."
Right.
So,
you know so yeah, it's
but I think it's just interesting. Like John had the mindset to be like, "I'm going to verbally
yeah, accost
berate
this
him."
guy.
I
Yeah,
I
even if
do
he
not.
wasn't the one involved, he was completely
Right.
separate from what
I
was more of that for other
yeah.
folks. I agree.
I
you know
do not have that mentality.
yeah.
Like, I
Yeah,
think
you
it's
would
just
just sit there and
conditioned in
watch
me.
and keep your fucking mouth shut.
Right. That's exactly
So
it. Like, I'm conditioned to like say as little as possible and be as non-threatening as possible.
yeah.
So,
Yep.
um, which doesn't always work,
Well,
but um, yeah, I do think it is interesting, just I think it was kind of assumed, but there is that kind of culture, police
yep.
culture, and just as far as the tactical language as John describes. But as you said, it's use at your own discretion or
Yeah.
advisement, because depending on your gender or your race may not go well for you depending on the situation.
Well, and to me,
So,
this is a matter of individual survival. Like
mhm,
I take that all the way to the step of learn how they're trained in martial ways, right? Like, that's being able to defend yourself that way. If something goes down and no one else is there to see it, you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff is a factor. So you know, and that could mean the difference between you surviving and you not, you know. So that to me is a big deal, you know. So knowing what they want out of the situation and knowing what you want out of the situation, you might be able to find somewhere to at least be. But yeah, crazy stuff, you know, and I'm sure in Georgia they'll be training more of that tactical language here any day
Probably,
now.
yeah.
So but they definitely have been using it over there in that forest. So, you know.
Right.
But anyway, in
I
other
was just
news,
wondering, do we have any Rockfin
if
pets or
people have been
whatever?
chatting in there, ARIM mostly it's Kissinger died.
Yeah.
From both Ghost Start and ARIM, on 2 different platforms, Rockfin and Rumble. We appreciate you being over there. And people are starting to pile into chat, so you know we're getting there.